This is Dr. Jenkins. We are back for part 2 of chapter 2 on nutrition guidelines. So we spent the first part of this video talking about a set of guidelines called the dietary reference intakes. And then we talked about my plate. And here we have some loose ends to catch up on. And then we'll do serving sizes, labeling claims, and we'll be good to go. So make sure you can define nutrient density and empty calories. Here we go. Nutrient density is the amount of nutrients in a food relative to its total number of calories. It's not just about total calories, folks. It's the amount of nutrients per calorie. A high nutrient density food has a lot of nutrients with a relatively lower caloric value. A low density food has low nutrient value but high overall calories. It's much better to have high nutrient density foods. In other words, limiting empty calories. Here are some examples. Let's look at calcium in terms of 1 serving of skim milk compared to some cheddar cheese. We take 1 serving of each, but we look at both of these have the same amount of calcium. So in 1 serving of skim milk, 300 milligrams of calcium. 1 serving of cheddar cheese, 170 milligrams of calcium. But look at the total calories. In this way, skim milk is much more nutrient dense for calcium. We get a lot of calcium at lower calorie value. The cheddar cheese, we get the same number of calcium, but over more calories. So it's not about total calories per se, it's about the amount of nutrients per calorie. What makes a food low in nutrient density often means that it has a lot of added things that are empty calories, a lot of added sugar, processing, packaging. If you look at a pack of Lunchables, there's a crap ton of sodium just so it can stay on the shelf for weeks. That's adding a lot of that in addition to other things, or adding a lot of calories with not a whole lot of nutrient value. So I've given some more examples here. I just talked about Lunchables. Here I found an actual label, nachos with cheese dip and salsa. And it didn't seem so bad to me until I looked at this. The actual package is only 4.4 ounces. So in a small amount of food, you're getting rather a lot of calories. And look at how much fat is there. And look at how much sodium. So these packaged foods have to add a lot of added things to make sure it can stay on the shelf for a long time, particularly sodium. And in the process of packaging this food, they add a lot of things for flavor that make it higher in calories, higher in fat, with lower nutritional value, because it increases the calories a whole bunch for not a whole lot of good nutrients. I've been mentioning this already. A lot of times, a food that's low in nutrient density is low in nutrient density because it gets so high in calories from what we consider empty calories. These are things that add calories but have little nutritional value. This is what we've just been talking about. Added sugar, packaging, processing. Foods high in empty calories. I mean, come on, we get some examples. Cola or soda is probably the best example. So here we have just, I think it's 12 ounces, a 12-ounce can, 150 calories. Think of how much it would take to get that same 150 calories in something more nutrient dense, like a sweet potato. You could have a whole sweet potato with many more packed with good nutrients, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals for that 150 calories. Here, we just have a lot of added sugar. It's the added sugar that makes it higher in calories. But that added sugar has little nutritional value, just mostly sugar. Our good old friend, a medium McDonald's French fry, 380, that's a lot of calories for a smaller amount. That's a whole lot of fat. Look at the percent daily value based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Almost a third of all your total fat just from that at one. It's not including the burger. It's not including other meals throughout the day. So it's what adds calories. Come here. It's what adds calories with little nutritional value. Empty calories. I apologize for my cat again. One thing that we skipped over before when we were talking about the guidelines was how many calories do we need? You may remember it, probably not because it's boring, but well, not when I do it. The estimated energy requirement, EER. So let's talk about it. How many calories? We've talked about how many grams of sodium, how many milligrams of sodium we need, or what percentage of our diet should come from carbs. What about total calories? Well, there isn't one right answer, but there are some guidelines. If we wanted to be really quick and dirty, if we take our body weight in pounds times 10, that gives you a base number round about how many calories you need per day just for basal metabolism. We're going to talk more about this later. What that means is the calories your body needs just to carry out its life functions. In other words, the calories you need just to keep your body going, not including calories that you might need to walk around, to exercise. But if you just laid on the couch all day, which you wouldn't do, obviously. If you did lay on the couch all day, though, your body's still burning calories because it takes calories to keep your heart pumping, keep your lungs inflating, keep your kidneys filtering, etc. A quick and dirty way to get an estimate, take your body weight in pounds times 10, which means add a 0. So a simple example, 150-pound person times 10, 1,500 calories just to keep their body going. I'm not saying this is the best way to go, but it's a quick and dirty way to give us a ballpark. And then whatever exercise or activity you do above that, you would add those calories to that 1,500. So probably one of the best ways to do it would be a formula called the estimated energy requirement, not EAR, EER. Again, they need help with this, don't they? We're going to be doing this later in the course, but I just went online, and this is the most current updated EER equation. So most of us are going to fall into the adults category, one for men, one for women. And if you look at this is a formula to give us a guideline for how many calories we need per day through food. So what is it going to include? Well, it's going to consider gender. Men have a higher metabolic rate usually, so they're going to need more calories. So it includes gender. It includes age. As we age, our metabolic rate goes down, so we need fewer calories. It includes your weight and your height. And also, PA means physical activity. So I know it's a boring formula, but it's a way for us to estimate how many calories you need per day through food. And it's not so bad because it incorporates gender, age, activity, height, and weight. You don't need to know the formula per se, but just know what this is. The EER equation. It's an equation that gives us a general idea of how many calories we need to bring in through food each day. And we're going to do it later in this course. There are tables out there, so we can look at tables. I think these are less common than they used to be as we're learning more about people and how different we can be. So I don't encourage using a table. I encourage more using the formula. But here's one just in case you're wondering. Remember, they're just approximations. Everyone's different, but it just gives us a ballpark. For example, for me, as a female in my age category, being pretty active, I know that I need about 2,200 calories per day. Someone who's the same age as me but less active might need a little bit less. Someone who's the same age as me might need a little more, but it gives us a ballpark. So I know it's not 1,000 calories and it's not 4,000 calories. It gives us a ballpark. All right, let's talk about serving sizes and then the nutrition label. When we talked about the RDAs, well, actually, let me stop that. In a minute, we're going to be looking at the nutrition labels, and the nutrition labels are given per serving. So it's important for us to understand what that means because, not surprisingly, we often eat more than just one serving, which sometimes is okay. If I have a big bike race tomorrow, I'm going to probably increase my carbohydrate and calorie intake to prepare for that. So sometimes you need more than one, but sometimes we don't realize we're eating more than one and our total calorie intake keeps going up and up and up. So I'd like you to know just some of these, okay? So for meat, chicken, fish, generally one serving size is 3 ounces. Sometimes you might see it as 4 ounces. To me, it's not a big difference, 3 to 4 ounces. We're going to go with 3, but understand it could be 4. However, that's less than you're going to get when you go out to dinner. If we think about a steakhouse, which is the smallest steak you can get? Probably filet mignon, what's that, 8 ounces, 9 ounces? That itself is over twice one serving, which is fine. But if you're having that every day or in every meal, multiple serving sizes, you may not be realizing it, but your calorie intake is going to be quite high. A lot of times we use things to better understand, because, what is 3 ounces? We don't really know that. So think about a deck of cards. So a piece of meat that's about the size of a deck of cards or the palm of your hand, that approximates about 3 ounces. I'm asking you to know cooked veggies and pasta, half a cup. That is not much. I mean, vegetables you might not have a problem with, even though you should be eating more. But pasta, half a cup. I mean, I think I probably have 2 cups. So again, it's fine sometimes, but it's important to consider. For dairy, I'm giving an example of cheese. Who doesn't like cheese? Unless you're a vegan, which is fine too. But 1 ounce, and that's pretty small. So here I've given you some information, but I only want you to know these 3. These 3 are the only ones that I could ask you on a quiz or an exam. And fruit, medium in size, like a baseball. So it's these 4 things, really. Again, we can use things to help us. So remember we said the palm of your hand for 1 serving size of protein. 1 serving of vegetables is about a close fit, maybe a little bit smaller. Vegetables. Look at 1 serving of carbs. What can fit into your cupped hand? That's about a half cup, folks. So it just gives us an idea. These have changed over time. The then and now. Obviously, as the time has gone by, the serving sizes get bigger, and it can be hard to hold ourselves down. If I see a big one Snickers, I'm probably going to eat the whole darn thing. When in reality, 1 serving is probably half of that. Eating meals out. I mentioned this before. When you go out to eat, they are almost always going to have more than 1 serving. So I like this example on the right. A piece of meat that's about the size of a deck of cards. Half a cup of pasta. Look at that. We usually eat more. So pay attention. Sometimes it's okay, but over the long haul, if you're always bringing in more serving sizes, it's going to add up in the calories and probably a lot of those nutrients that you don't want it to. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch here, and one really important part of this chapter is the food label. So every packaged food must have a label here in the United States. Please pay attention to the word packaged. There are some exceptions, which we're going to talk about. But when we say packaged, we usually mean things in the aisles of a grocery store. If you're going through the aisles of a grocery store, what are you going to see? Boxed cereal, bagged cookies, boxed pasta that's uncooked. So in the aisles, that's where we usually have these packaged foods that are required by law here in the US to have a standardized label. The things that we'll talk about as some of the exceptions tend to be more on the perimeter of a grocery store. Fresh fruits and vegetables. We're not going to have a nutrition label on every apple or every grape. Deli meats that you actually go to the counter and get. But those are things usually on the perimeter of the grocery store. So here are our most recently updated food labels. Looks like this. Each label here in the US is standardized to look the same. And that uniformity means that when we look at it, we can more easily understand what we're looking at. And folks, it really isn't that bad. So I hope that you spend some time here, listen, look at it, and you'll get the hang of it. Some exemptions. Well, non-packaged foods. Remember I said that every packaged food must have a nutrition label? Well, non-packaged foods to some extent are exempt. Fresh fruit or veggies. And grocery stores are required to have that nutrition information on hand or posted. So if you actually want to know, you can ask someone that works at the grocery store. I'd like to see a nutrition label for the asparagus, please. And they're, by law, supposed to be able to provide it to you. Other exemptions, I mentioned the deli, spices, things in bulk, coffee, things that don't provide a whole lot of nutritional value, single ingredient meat products where we don't have a lot of information on actually how many calories are in there. Okay, but really, most of the things that we're going to pick up at the grocery store, or a lot of them, will be required to have a label on it. Don't be intimidated. Okay. The new one, here's what it looks like. It has the serving size. And by the way, their serving size isn't always what the technical serving size is. So here's frozen lasagna, 1 cup. So they're also supposed to list how many servings are in that. So if you ate this whole thing, if you didn't just have 1 cup, if you had the whole box, you would be having 4 servings. So you need to take everything on here and multiply it by 4. Tells us how many calories are per serving. I mentioned the percent daily value to you. These are not the exact same as the RDA, but they're based off of the RDA. These nutritional label guidelines tell us that 5% of the daily value is low, 5% or less. 20% or more is high. You don't have to know those numbers for me. That's just their definition. Percent daily value. And notice that is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Not everybody needs a 2,000 calorie. In fact, most people will not. They'll need a little bit more or maybe a little bit less. Probably most of you will need more. So when this box tells us that ingesting 1 serving of this lasagna satisfies 12% of our total fat need, that's only for a 2,000 calorie diet. What if you were on a 4,000 calorie diet? This would only satisfy 6%. They picked based on a 2,000 calorie diet because that tends to be close to the average. But especially as younger people, for many of you, your recommended calorie intake per day is higher than 2,000 calories. So please keep that in mind. Then it tells us how many grams of the macronutrients, fat, carbohydrate, protein. They'll do a breakdown. Something that's been new to this iteration of the nutrition label is they actually list out added sugars. Didn't always used to be that way. And then they'll include some of the micronutrients. You can see here vitamin D, calcium, iron. Okay. So you also will see sometimes there'll be a dual column label where it has per serving, but then per container, where they do the math for you. But everything else is identical. The percent daily values based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Now, in addition to the standardized nutrition label, and by the way, this nutrition label here is an older one. So if you toggle between them, this looks a little bit different. In particular, the newer label has the calories in larger font. Look at the calories here in very large font. Look at the calories here in really large font. This is an older one, but it still gets my point across. In addition to the label, there will be an ingredient list. Now this is cool. You may not know this. What is listed first is what is present in that food in highest amounts. Look at the first thing in these legendary LA Light bars. Caramel. In other words, sugar. Should be no surprise that a lot of these packaged foods have the most sugar because they want you to buy them because they taste good. So what's listed first is present in that food in highest amounts, and then it goes progressively down. What's listed last is in lowest quantities. Pretty interesting. So I've given you some examples here because the best way to learn is to practice. So I've picked out Kraft macaroni and cheese. Let's say you have a study break. You eat a whole darn box. So let's practice. Answer these questions. And I don't know why my numbers didn't come over on this program. I have a couple questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And these questions are based off of if you have a whole box, look at how many servings are per container. 3, right? And these are based off of a full box prepared. So in this particular dual column label, the one, I'll use red, the one here is just for the dry mix without adding the packet of cheesy goodness and milk. But these are the nutritional information per 1 cup prepared. So when you answer these questions, you want to use the prepared. And remember, this is per 1 cup prepared. That's only 1 serving. But if you eat the whole thing, how many servings? 3. So I'm asking you, how many calories did you ingest in total? You can go through the questions on your own. I really encourage you. Folks, the way you're going to learn is to do it yourself. Pause this, stop, and try to answer these questions. At the end, we're going to go over it together. Another example, here we have some Cheerios. I'm asking you for 1.5 cups. 1 cup is a serving, but what if you have 1.5 cups? And then we added some milk. Here, they give you they give you the nutritional information just for the cereal. Here, the cereal with a 1/2 cup milk. But I'd like you to use this value. You used a 1/2 cup skim milk. Use that value. So you're going to use the values just for the cereal. Remember, 1.5 cups. And then we'll add 86 calories. So again, we have a series of questions that we'll go through it together at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4. Please stop. Look at it. More examples. Here we have a comparison of whole to 2% to skim milk. These are old labels. They don't have the calories in the big font, but it still gives us an example of how we can compare. You might be surprised. Of course, these values are based off of 2% fat. Skim has no fat. So a lot of the differences will be in total grams of fat. But is the sugar content different? Is the protein, is the vitamin and mineral content different? Answer these questions as practice and then come back to me at the end. Okay. In addition to understanding the basics of how to read a nutrition label, we need to understand claims. Because what do? The advertisers, the food companies, they barrage us with low fat. This can lower cholesterol. This is fortified. What do all these things mean? Do they actually mean anything, or can these manufacturers put on the label anything they want? They are regulated. So, for the most part, most claims are regulated, which should come as a relief, right? The government, our food regulating bodies, dictate some rules. There are regulations. So I've given you some examples. I've combined 2 tables, so I apologize. They look a little bit different. But just as an example, if something says reduced fat, if a food says reduced fat, you know what that means? In order for them to be able to print that on their label, reduced fat, it has to have at least 25% less fat per serving than the original version. Light, something that is advertised as light, it has to have a third fewer calories or 50% less fat than the original. You don't need to know these specifics. They're interesting to look at. What I want you to take away first right here is that there are regulations, which is a great thing. An example, here we have regular Utz potato chips on your left, and then reduced fat Utz potato chips on your right. Are they following the rules when they say reduced fat? If I go back, what does it say for reduced fat? The reduced fat version has to have at least 25% less fat per serving. So the regular potato chips, 10 grams per serving. The reduced fat potato chips, 7 grams per serving. Let's do some math. We find the difference. The regular version has 10 grams. Reduced fat version has 7. 10 minus 7 is 3, so it's a 3-gram difference. Then we do the math. 3 divided by 10 is 30%. So our reduced fat version has 30% less fat than the original. Does that fit into the rules? Yes. Now, by the way, not having understood this, you might think, oh, reduced fat, that must mean it has like half the fat. Nope. It can have 3/4 of the fat. But at least for me, it's encouraging that there are some guidelines. Other guidelines, again, you don't need to know the specifics, but I'm just pointing out that there are guidelines. I like to pick this one out, lean. Oh, this meat is lean. This protein is lean. Does it have to actually mean something? Yes, it does. Can be used on a seafood or meat that contains less than 10 grams of fat per serving. 4.5 grams of that are less saturated, and they have a control over cholesterol too. So here's the thing. You see lean and you might think, oh, that has no fat, or maybe 5% fat, but it can still have 10% fat. Let's have a look. This is an old nutrition label from Hannaford. But look, I chose it because it has a serving size of 3 ounces. It's lean, 90% lean. How many grams of fat per serving? 9.97. What was the rule? It has to be less than 10. Boy, don't they get it as close as they can. Of course they're going to do that, folks. They want to have as much fat as they can for flavor, but still be under the guidelines of being able to say lean. Craziness. Okay, make sure you can define these things. Processed. A lot of our food that's packaged is processed, mostly to increase shelf life. That just means they add things. They add things to increase shelf life. It's not in the interest of these big companies to make food products that will spoil or go bad quickly. So they add all these chemicals, mostly, to make it taste better, but also to increase shelf life so they can make more money. Refined is just another word for processing. In particular, some nutrients are removed along the way. It's interesting because when you see refined, you might think, oh, that's good. A refined person has manners, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, it means processed, which is usually not good in terms of nutrients. Because in that process of processing it, some nutrients are lost, and we're adding crappy chemicals. So for our purposes, just know that these two go together. Processed and refined. It means processed. Some nutrients are lost along the way. Chemicals are added to increase shelf life. Now, sometimes what these companies will do is they'll go back. They'll process it first to increase that shelf life, but then they'll add some nutrients back to original levels. That's an enriched product. And again, this wordplay is really something. If I see enriched, oh, that's better. No, it's not better. They added chemicals and then they replaced some lost nutrients back to how they were to begin with. So it's a play on words that makes it sound really good, but it's really no better. Fortified means that things were lost during processing, but then they added more. They added it above original levels. Please pay attention to these definitions. So I gave you some examples. Again, these are old nutrition labels, but we can see a white grain product at the top and a whole grain product at the bottom. White grains are processed, and processing, they add some chemicals to increase shelf life, but it also removes nutrients. Whole grain, now let's not be completely whatever, I can't think of the word, but this is a packaged food too, so they still had to do some processing, but whole grain foods, they use the whole part of the grain. Instead of using only a part of the grain, they use the whole grain when they prepare it, and it maintains a lot more nutrients. So if you look at these, this maintains a lot more, particularly of those micronutrients, compared to this. I'm not going to show you specific labels and have you analyze like this on a test, but I'm just pointing some things out. I mentioned fortified and enriched. A lot of our milk products, including soy milk, almond milk, are fortified. And that means that they add vitamin D in. Sometimes fortified means they add it above original levels. They do it because this is our primary way to get vitamin D. Look, let me use this color. Vitamin A and D. So a lot of times we get some of these, particularly vitamins and minerals, through fortified food, where they purposely add it, knowing that we're not outside as much as we used to get it through the sun. Okay. All right. We're going to get towards the end here. Specific labeling claims. So we've already talked about there are some rules about companies being able to say our meat is lean or our potato chips are reduced fat. There's also a set of guidelines based off of claims. Some of these we already talked about. We're going to add some more. Labeling claims. The first one is a nutrient content, right? Nutrient content. This means what it sounds like. It's a claim that a company can make about that food's nutrient content. So what are some examples? Low sodium, fat-free. We just talked about this. This is what we already talked about. They do have to meet criteria, which is a good thing. So in order for this to say high fiber, it had to meet an FDA stated guideline. In order for this to say extra lean, in order for this to say high protein, it had to meet those FDA criteria. Again, which may not be as much as you think, but it's something. That's a nutrient content claim. The one where it gets sticky is health claims. Can help lower cholesterol. What does this say? Heart healthy. That's kind of hard to read. That says heart healthy. These are health claims. Good for your heart. Can lower cholesterol. There's two different types of health claims. Typically, the word that they use is authorized, an authorized health claim, versus a qualified health claim. These are both health claims. Authorized versus qualified. Authorized is better. In other words, it's been reviewed by the FDA, supported by evidence, scientific evidence using a scientific method. There is scientific agreement among experts in that field. This is a rigorous standard. It's not just ho-hum. There has been significant scientific agreement in studies that show this to be true. An example here, can help lower cholesterol. in order for this company to say that, they had to meet this scientific evidence. This is a good thing. So not every food can just say, good for your heart, strengthens bones, improves brain function. A qualified health claim has to meet a rigorous standard. Excuse me, not qualified, authorized. An authorized health claim. On the other hand, a qualified health claim is meh. There might be some scientific evidence, but it doesn't meet significant agreement. And because of that, this is new. This wasn't the case 10 years ago, actually. There's a disclaimer. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but here we have some heart-healthy Planters nuts. Heart healthy. Oh, it sounds, that's a health claim, but look at the disclaimer. It even says, and I know it's kind of hard to see. Let me get yellow. My bad here. It even says here, qualified health claim. These companies are required to put that on there. So look carefully. You might just look at the front of the box and see this. Look for the disclaimer. If you see a disclaimer below it or on the back, then you know it's a qualified health claim, not as stringent, right? When we zoom in on the disclaimer, scientific evidence suggests, but does not prove, that this can actually lower your cholesterol, be healthy for your heart. So there's an authorized health claim, meets a rigorous standard, no disclaimer needed. And there's a qualified health claim where there's some evidence, but it's not specifically supported, and there must be a disclaimer. Now we get to the lowest of the lowest, a structure function claim. Of the ones that we're talking about, this one does not have any oversight. A structure function claim is something that a food product might have on it that says how it might affect the structure or function of the body. They can't use the words treats, may lower. If I go back, can help lower cholesterol, is heart healthy. These are only things you can say as a health claim that at least have some scientific evidence backing it. But there's a workaround, and if you're not careful, you don't realize it. A structure function claim, oh look, this has antioxidants. It supports a healthy immune system. Doesn't say it can cure or treat or lower. So they can get away with it, and there's no FDA approval. So we really have no idea whether that's true or not. Make sure you know all those. Okay, we're going to wind down here. These are the answers to the true and false. We basically already gone through these. Okay, let's go over together to end this chapter the nutrition label examples. So this was our macaroni and cheese that you were studying so hard you ate the whole box. I really like that blue color. Let's bring blue back. What do you think, lighter blue? Yeah. So if you had 3 servings, actually it's not looking so good against the blue, let's do orange. If you had 3 servings, we've got to multiply, right? So how many calories? And I told you to do the prepared. So we do 360 times 2.5, 900. Okay, what nutrient was present in the highest amounts? I'm talking about carbs, fat, or protein. So we compare fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Of the prepared, we had 12 grams, 49 grams, 10, 49. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. The most carbohydrates. How many grams did they ingest in total? So we would take these numbers. You know what? I made a mistake, folks. That's why I've been pausing, and I'm so sorry. But I'm going to change it in my notes, but I'm not going to re-record this whole thing because this is a lesson too. Don't we sometimes learn, we make mistakes, and it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. So it should be times 3. So if we do 360 times 3, my bad, folks. If you have this whole box, 1,080 calories. Oh my God, that's probably close to half of what we need just from this one box. This example is still correct, but now we got to multiply these by 3. So how many grams of total carbohydrates? 147. That's a lot for one box of food. We do 12 grams of total fat times, I don't even need a calculator for that. That's 36 grams. And then we do 10 times 3 is 30 grams. My apologies for that. It should be multiplied by 3. Looking at the fat content, where's fat? Would you say that most were healthy? Well, we want to compare saturated to total. So if we look at this, 4.5 out of 12 were saturated fat. That's just over a third, isn't it? Because 4 times 3 is 12. I did the math. Over a third of the fat is from saturated fat. That's a lot. Our recommendations tell us that only 10% should come from saturated fat. You don't need to know that number, but the guidelines say that only 10% of our total fat should come from fat. So we've exceeded. So I would say this has a lot of unhealthy fat. All right, I know I got these right. So here we have our bowl of Cheerios, but we had 1.5 cups. How many total calories? 140. And then half of that is 70 plus our milk. Total calories 296. Does this cereal have more or less sugar than most popular cereals? I was talking mostly about the added sugars. 12 grams out of 30, that's a lot, right? 12 out of 30, just under half. So just under half of our total sugars are added sugars. That's a lot, but probably a lot of the other cereals have just as much, if not more. What percentage of daily total fat did your roommate satisfy? Only from cereal. So 3% of the daily value, but that's based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. I told you that your roommate needs 3,000 calories. So if this met 3% of the total fat needs on a 2,000 calorie diet, it would only meet 1.5%. Or excuse me, we would do 3% plus 1.5, 4.5%. Do you think this food is more or less nutrient dense than the macaroni and cheese? I think it's more nutrient dense. Well, actually, I don't think I know. Look at all these vitamins and minerals. So the reason this is more nutrient dense is per calorie, this is actually lower in calories than the mac and cheese, and we get more nutrients. Okay. And here's our last one before I run out of battery life on here. We look at the total fat in the whole milk per serving, which is 1 cup in this example. 8 grams compared to 5 compared to 0, probably as we would suggest. How much lower is the 2% compared to the whole? 8 minus 5 is 3. 3 divided by the total 8 times 100, 37.5. Which has the highest sugar content? Carbohydrate? 2%. Sometimes when they strip away some of the fat, they actually add some sugar. That's going to be a theme that you'll see in these foods. When they reduce the fat, a lot of times they add more sugar. Here it's 1 gram, not a big deal. But look at some of the other like healthy bars or that LA Light thing. When they take fat away, they add sugar so it'll still taste good. So even though you might be a little bit better on the fat, all that added sugar is not doing anything for you either. Is there a difference in protein? No. 8, 8, 8. Is there a difference in vitamin and mineral? Very little. These are the same. This is a little bit lower, but overall very similar. All right, folks. Study hard. Any questions, let me know.